read. I don't speak Hebrew, so forgive me the way this may come out. Right?
No.
Yeah, it's not enough phlegm in that.
All right. Then Eliashib, the high priest, arose with his brothers the priests and built the sheep gate. They consecrated it, and they hung its doors. They consecrated the wall to the Tower of the 100 and the Tower of Hananel. Next to him, the men of Jericho built, and next to them, Zachar, son of Imri, built. Now the sons of Anasah built the fish gate, and they laid its beams and hung its doors with its bolts and bars. Next to them, Meremoth, the son of Uriah, the son of Hakaz, made repairs. And next to him, Meshullam, the son of Berechiah, the son of Mezeshabel, made repairs. And next to him, Zadok, the son of Bana, also made repairs. Moreover, next to him, the Tekoites made repairs, but the nobles did not support the work of their masters. Joiada, the son of Hessa, and Meshullam, the son of Besadiah, repaired the old gate. They laid its beams and hung its doors with its bolts and bars. Next to them, Melatiah the Gibeonite and Jadon the Meronothite, the men of Gibeon and Mizpah, also made repairs for the official seat of the governor of the province beyond the river. Next to him, Uzziel, the son of Haraiah, and the goldsmiths made repairs. Next to him, Hananiah, one of the perfumers, made repairs. And they restored Jerusalem as far as the broad wall. Next to them, Rephaiah, the son of Hur, the official of half the district of Jerusalem, made repairs. Next to them, Jedaiah, the son of Harumaph, made repairs opposite his house. Next to him, Hephish, the son of Hashabaniah, made repairs. Melchiah, the son of Haram, and Hasad, the son of Hath Moab, repaired another section and the Tower of the Furnaces. Next to him, Shallum, the son of Halotesh, the official of half the district of Jerusalem, made repairs, he and his daughters. Hanan and the inhabitants of Zanoah repaired the valley gate. They built it and hung its doors with its bolt and its bars, and 1,000 cubits of the wall to the refuge gate. Malchijah, the son of Rechab, the official of the district of Beth-Haraim, repaired the refuge gate. He built it and hung its doors with its bolts and bars. Shallum, son of Kol-Hoseh, the official of the district of Mizpah, repaired the fountain gate. He built it, covered it, and hung its doors with its bolts and bars. And the wall of the pool of Shelah at the king's garden, as far as the steps that descend from the city of David. After him, Nehemiah, the son of Azbuk, official of half the district of Beth-Zur, made repairs as far as a point opposite the tombs of David, and as far as the artificial pool in the house of the mighty men. After him, the Levites carried out repairs under Rahum, son of Bani. Next to him, Hashabiah, the official of half the district of Keilah, carried out repairs for his district. After him, their brothers carried out repairs under Bavai, the son of Henadad, official of the other half of the district of Keilah. Next to him, Ezra, the son of Jeshua, the official of Mizpah, repaired another section in front of the ascent of the armory at the angle. After him, Baruch, son of Zabbai, zealously repaired another section from the angle to the doorway of the house of Eliashib, the high priest. After him, Meremoth, son of Uriah, the son of Hakkoz, repaired another section from the doorway of Eliashib's house, even as far as the end of his house. After him, the priests, the men of the valley, carried out repairs. After them, Benjamin and Hashub carried out repairs in front of their house. After them, Azariah, the son of Maaseiah, son of Ananiah, carried out repairs beside his house. After him, Benui, the son of Henadad, repaired another section from the house of Azariah as far as the angle and as far as the corner. Palal, son of Uzziah, made repairs in front of the angle and the tower projected from the upper house of the king, which is by the court of the guard. After him, Pedadiah, the son of Parosh, made repairs. The temple servants living in Ophel made repairs as far as the front of the water gate toward the east and the projecting tower. After them, the Tekoites repaired another section in front of the great projecting tower as far as the wall of Ophel. Above the horse gate, the priests carried out repairs, each in front of his house. After them, Zadok, the son of Immer, carried out repairs in front of his house. And after him, Shemaiah, the son of Shechaniah, the keeper of the east gate, carried out repairs. After him, Hananiah, the son of Shelemiah, and Hanan, the sixth son of Zalaphat, repaired another section. After him, Meshulam, the son of Berechiah, carried out repairs in front of his own quarters. After him, Malatiah, one of the goldsmiths, carried out repairs as far as the house of the temple servants and of the merchants in front of the inspection gate, also known as the muster gate, and as far as the upper room of the corner. Between the upper room of the corner and the sheep gate, the goldsmiths and the merchants carried out repairs. So that's basically the map that you got, right? So this is somewhat uncertain. I'm going to give a handout in a minute that's going to show a different outline for the city of Jerusalem. But the city of Jerusalem used to extend a long ways to the left of what you see on your map there. And that part was destroyed when the Babylonians came. They just leveled the whole thing. So in Nehemiah's time, it was just this small thing. And eventually, they expanded Jerusalem back into that. So, I mean, I know this is small, but these are pictures of. So on the east side, the right-hand side of your map, that is the Kidron Valley. So yeah. So anyway, there's the valley. There's the Temple Mount, which is a pretty big edifice. Right? I mean, that Temple Mount that you're seeing there would have been built by Herod when he built the temple, and now the Dome of the Rock is there instead of the temple. But we're going to see some pictures, and this is on the east side of Jerusalem. That would be kind of where you see the great projecting tower on your map. So there's some pieces of the wall. So there's actually wall left over from when David was there. And that was like a step wall. And then Nehemiah's wall was built on top of that. So, and this is ruins of houses that were outside the wall that were destroyed when the Babylonians took over. But this here was David's wall, I think parts of Nehemiah's wall. There's the step wall. Anyway, yeah, that's a section of Nehemiah's wall. There's one that they dug up. So Nehemiah's wall is below the level of the streets now. in places in Jerusalem. So this was an archaeological dig that they found this thing. But you can see what it's built of. It's kind of a collection of different sized stones and so forth. And then the outer portion is kind of laid up stones, so it's square, but the inside it looks like
Backfill.
Backfill. Yeah.
How far across is that from left to right for us?
You know,
how deep is that wall?
I can't tell you for sure. It varied depending where the wall was, because there was a section called the broad wall that was thicker and stuff, but I'm led to believe it was anywhere from 3 to 8 feet thick. The broad wall, I think, would be bigger than that. We're going to see, yeah, so there's a person standing on it. So
That's more like 20
he
feet.
gives some scale. I'm looking at it thinking, how did they move those rocks, right? I mean, one guy didn't put those rocks in place. Those things must have weighed 500 pounds.
No dump trucks.
No,
Yeah,
no doubt.
they hired some Egyptians.
Yeah, so
Had special
this
tools.
part might have been part of David's wall, the stepping wall, and then Nehemiah's wall was built on top of it. But it just gives, that's a zoom out of the same area. And that's the ruins of an old house that would have been destroyed when the Babylonians leveled the city. That would have been just outside the wall. Okay. But anyway, it gives you some idea of what we're talking about. So, for those that were picking up food, all we did was we read through chapter 3 and we looked at the map. And basically, chapter 3 describes the building of the wall, starting at the top at the sheep gate, and then going counterclockwise around the wall. So there's all these names and so forth. So as I read, the homework assignment was people are going to count how many groups of people helped in this. And how'd you do?
Probably 41.
Actually, I think it was 42. So, according to Carl's notes here, well, before I get into that, let's back up a minute. Let's start at the beginning with Ezra. Even before that, why were the Jews in captivity?
They worship other gods and were disobedient.
Series of bad kings, right? The northern kingdom, Israel split into 2 kingdoms. The northern kingdom, there was 10 tribes. They were taken over by the Assyrians. The southern kingdom became known as Judah. And that was 2 tribes, Benjamin and Judah. So they had not all bad kings. They had a few good ones in there. And so that kingdom persisted for about 150 years longer before it was finally conquered by the Babylonians, who leveled the place. And then what happened? What happened to the Jews during this conquering? Where did they end up? It's okay to talk. I got to go back and do it all over again.
I got it.
So they got exiled to
Babylon.
Babylon for the southern kingdom. As we said, the northern kingdom was exiled to Assyria, which is to the north. Babylon is to the east. Quite a ways to the east, about 800, 900 miles to the east. Did everybody go? Who went?
The leading people.
Leading people, right? They left all the paupers behind, all the folks that had no money and stuff. They let them stay behind. But anybody that had skills or leadership, they took them. Right? How long were they in Babylon? 70 years. Why were they there for 70 years?
So the land would have its Sabbath.
Yes, right? Because they didn't do the Sabbath every 7th year for 490 years, and so the land would have its Sabbath. And then what happened? Then Zerubbabel came along, and some of them came back with Zerubbabel, right? What happened in the Jerusalem area during that 70 years where everybody was happy? The neighbors moved in, right? So you've got yourself a house, and suddenly this guy shows up and says, "What are you doing on my land? Get out of here," right? How's that going to go over with the neighbors? So they weren't exactly welcome back, were they? Right? And then a few years later, another group comes back with Ezra. Right? Zerubbabel's group rebuilt the altar, right, and the temple, but they didn't really build the city. And then Ezra comes back with another group, and deja vu, right? Oh, great, here's another one come to take our land from us, folks that moved in. So they weren't exactly welcome either. And Ezra was more of a spiritual revival. And then the last group comes back with Nehemiah, which happened 15 to 20 years later after Ezra. And he's coming back to build the wall. So from the first chapter or two of Nehemiah, what do you remember? Right? First of all, who was Nehemiah? What was his job? Cupbearer to the king, which means he's the food taster, right? He sees the king regularly. He probably wasn't the only cupbearer. Some people think they did it in season, so he did 1/4 of the year. But apparently he was well liked because he went in and asked for the king for some stuff and got it. So what did Nehemiah do at the beginning of this book when he found out what was going on in Jerusalem? What was his reaction?
Right.
He was really upset and he prayed. How long did he pray? Months, right? Like 4 or 5 months. And then one day, kind of the king sprung it on him, right? Why are you so sad? Right? So this was his moment to bare his soul to the king for why he was so sad. And he does that and asks for a bunch of stuff, right? He asks for permission to go back and rebuild the walls. Why were the walls important? Or were they important? Right. You were never going to have a vibrant city without walls, because if you started getting any money, people were just going to come in and take it from you. And so the walls not only meant protection, but it also was kind of a symbol of economic prosperity that you had walls. Right? And up until now, Jerusalem didn't have any. So then in Ezra, when Ezra came back, he found a problem. You remember what the problem was that he found when he first came back? Intermarriage, right? So, what did they do about it? They sent their wives away, right? So you're one of the neighbors, and these Jews say, "Here's your wife back. She's not one of us. We don't want her." How's that going to go over? Right? So now they've done a couple of things. These doggone Jews, they're the most obstinate, obnoxious people I've ever seen in my life, right? And so you can see as we get in here why some of the natives might have been a little restless about all this thing, right? Okay, so then we get into chapter 3. 3, which is what we just read. Right? So verse 1, where did this all start? The rebuilding of the walls. Shoot here. Actually, I missed one thing. I got to go back and do one more thing. Last week, in chapters 1 and 2, we laid out Nehemiah's plan for spiritual growth. So I'll just review it, and hopefully it'll sound familiar, right? The first thing he did was he fixed his focus. And he didn't get distracted. He got back to Jerusalem. He had 3 days to rest up, and then he went and started the plan, right? The next thing he did was he found out the facts. He went by night and surveyed the walls himself. Didn't tell anybody. He just was doing reconnoitering, right? He formed a fellowship. He's not going to rebuild these walls himself, so he's got to recruit some people. Right? He fortified his faith. He remembered all the things God had done to get him as far as he's been. And in the end of chapter 2, some foes show up. You see Tobiah the Ammonite, Sanballat the Horonite, and Geshem the Arab. They were not happy, right? So there's the David was restless. We also talked about this applies to us, right? If we're going to grow in our spiritual life, we need to have the same thing. We need to fix our focus, not get distracted. We need to find the facts. We need to search the scriptures for ourselves and not just be spoon-fed with stuff, right? Let God speak to us individually. We need to form a fellowship. Iron sharpens iron, or one man sharpens another. So the question is, who's sharpening your life? Fortify your faith. You remember what God's done for you in the past. And then finally, face your foes. But there will be some somewhere along the way. It's great to talk about today, right? There will be foes. All right. Now we can start the chapter 3. All right. So, where did this work start? Chapter 3, verse 1. And who's doing it?
The leadership.
It starts with the priests, right? The spiritual leaders. And what did they do?
Built it and then they did.
Yes, they built it and they consecrated it, right? They dedicated it to the Lord. So that's a good way to begin, isn't it? Too often we start things out on our own strength and we don't give it to the Lord to begin with. And I mean, this is a big task, right? We're talking probably 1.5 miles of walls. I'm going to pass out notes that says 2.5 miles, but I don't think that's right. That's the expanded position. But still, 1.5 miles walls, up to 8 feet thick, right? In places up to 39 feet tall. That's a lot of rock. So as we look at this, we're going to look at chapter 3, 4, and 6 today. The next time we meet, we're going to look at 4, 5, and 6. So today, chapter 3 starts with kind of a bird's eye view. This is what was done. This is the way we like to live our life in that view. Chapters 4 and 6, and a little bit of 5, is where we live. That's where all the problems go into in detail and all those things. And unfortunately, that's where we live, right? We live in the mess of life. So, all right. So, as we go through this, we're seeing names. They'll say son of so forth, son of so forth. Clearly, they're the son of somebody else. But in other places, it doesn't talk about that. It talks about the inhabitants of Zenoa, verse 13, and so forth, right? These are village names of the villages immediately surrounding Jerusalem. So some people that lived in Jerusalem, right, that's the ones that are named by names. And the other ones are people that came from outside Jerusalem to help with the work. The immediate vicinity, but outside Jerusalem. All right. Let's see. Any guesses how many groups of people are mentioned here? Or said 41. So that right. I think it was 42. It's a bunch, right? How many trades are mentioned in this?
Goldsmiths, one.
Goldsmiths were one.
Perfumers.
Perfumers was one.
Priests.
Priests, yeah. They're probably good masons, right?
Yeah.
Perfumers, they're probably good at 12, right?
Okay, his daughters.
So the point here is that these were not just professional people, these were not buildings, this was whoever would show up, right? So, anybody know how many people altogether came back from captivity? We said it's
About
about
that last 40-something thousand.
yeah, and then there's some other things. Quick and dirty, around 50,000 people came back with all three groups, so they didn't come all at once. Did it sound like 50,000 people were building the wall?
No.
Not even close, did it? Right? So you've got what you call non-participants, right? So chapter 3 would make a historian salivate. All the names and stuff, he's like, oh man, this is great stuff. The rest of this, it kind of makes our eyes close. Yeah, on the back, that's the expanded Jerusalem. That whole big square thing on the left probably wasn't there at the time. There's actually a valley that goes right up the middle of that between the part that Nehemiah had and the other part. So Jerusalem is not a level city. All right, so yeah.
What is, do you know exactly what the city of David is? Because when I think city, I'm thinking of a big city, like a big city, right?
No.
But it says like stairs descending from the city of David at the bottom.
Yeah, I think the city of David would have been a section in Jerusalem right in here. So when you think city, you're thinking New York or Charlotte, and they're thinking Clover. All right. So it was pretty small. All right, so lots of different people groups, and it describes just in a few words how each section was built or rebuilt. As you look at it, do you see any rhyme or reason to who built what?
I don't know, it was just across from their house.
Yes, right? Across from their house. What does that tell you? There's some inferences we can draw from that. You haven't had time to think about it like I have. So.
I mean, they're
Who knew who was building where? Everybody. Everybody knew who was building where. This wasn't that big a place, right? This was news. So everybody was accountable, right? If you didn't do a good job, The whole city is going to know it. Right? The other thing is, what happens if you didn't do a good job or didn't do the job at all, right? Everybody's built this great wall and you didn't do anything.
It's pretty obvious.
It's pretty obvious, and
Dangerous.
the city is still at risk,
Yeah.
right? So everybody better contribute or this isn't going to work. Yeah. And so we see that probably as much out of self-interest as anything that these people put their minds to the work. It says that somewhere. They had a mind to work. Might be in chapter 4. No?
You also look across from your house, you want your house to be protected. So.
Yes. Yep, you got self-interest and you're accountable. Everybody's going to know if you didn't do a good job.
Yeah, also might kind of harken back to, not a whole lot of people were willing to help, so, all right, well, at least you protect your own house.
Yeah. And I imagine that rubs some people the wrong way too. They're out there slaving away, moving rock, while 40,000 other people are not doing anything. Right? Kind of sounds like the church, doesn't it?
It's like a football game. You got 22 people on the field that are in desperate need of a break, and 50,000 people in the stands that are in desperate need of exercise.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Carl makes the point. What would have happened if instead of 42 different groups, there was 84 groups? Right? You could have built the wall in half the time. So, all right. If more people had showed up, we might not have had verses chapter 4, 16 to 18. Which says, and that day on, half of my servants carried on the work, while half of them had spears, shields, bows, and breastplates. If they'd built quick enough, their enemies wouldn't have had time to react, because they didn't build quite as quick. The word got out, right? So, this isn't just about the Jews. This is about us. Right? We all have walls to build. We have walls to build in our personal spiritual walk. Right? Each of us, we need to think about, where's the breach in my wall? Where's the low spot? And what do I need to do to build up my wall? Second of all, we need to think about, what are the walls that need to be built in our church local. Right? Where's the breach? Where's the low spot? And are we willing to do the work to build the wall up? And then we need to think about the church universal. Where are the walls? And maybe the church national with Ray's sermon. Right? Where are the walls that have been breached or need to be built up? I have a tremendous respect for this man, Nehemiah. He started out doing what? He's a cupbearer of the king, right? He's a servant who delivers food. And what has he done here? He's assembled a workforce and got them to all pull together in unity, right? A very diverse group, right? There's Levites, there's priests, there's merchants, there's, I don't know what perfumer is. I read that it's not what we think, that these would be the people that would sell spices when you were embalming someone, and that kind of thing. And he got all these people to pull together and unite. That's an incredible leadership, isn't it? And I can't help but think, us old folks like me, we look at the younger generation and we roll our eyes and so forth, right? Oh my word, this is the future of our country. It's easy to get into that. But the flip side is, he was a man who was serving the king once, right? But given the right opportunity, he turns into an amazing leader. We've got people all around us, young people all around us, just like them. You know, World War II, we called them the greatest generation. Well, they were partly their greatest generation because they had the greatest opportunity. As horrible as it was, the circumstances. I mean, you weren't going to be a farm guy and go fly a fighter plane anywhere else but in the middle of the war. And they did it and were successful and so forth. We got people around us who they're just pools of latent talent. If we could just find a way to get them to release it. And we're going to talk a little bit about that next time we meet, I think. So there's tremendous leadership lessons in this book of Nehemiah. There's some verses here in your notes, Matthew. Do you have that, Lauren?
Yeah.
Matthew 9.
When he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field.
Right? Sounds like Jerusalem in the day, doesn't it? So when we're praying, do you ever pray this way? I confess that I've fallen short. As a follower of Christ, we have a responsibility to be part of the team that builds up the church. We're not supposed to be consumer Christians. And I'm preaching to the choir here, and I know. But the people that show up at church for their 1 hour Sunday obligation and go home and forget it, that is not what Christ is calling us to. We are to be salt and light in the workforce, wherever that is. Salt and light in our family, and so forth. These are the breaches in the walls that we need to shore up. Don't be like the nobles of Tekoa. They didn't do any work. I thought it was interesting. It was the nobles, the leaders, that didn't do any work. Now we'll let the underlings do that. Right? You don't lead that way. You lead from the front, not the back, right? If you have a guy who's in charge of you who's like that, he has no credibility, right? It's the guy who gets in the dirt with you and is shoveling right next to you who's your boss. That's the guy who's got some credit, right? And so we need to be that way in our personal lives, in our business relationships, and in our church. If Ray was the kind of guy who never got his hands dirty, I don't know if I'd be here in this church. But Ray is that kind of guy. And that makes a difference. And don't be like the thousands who didn't respond to the call. Right? All right. Not only do we have to show up, we got to work together. So, what are we working towards? What are we working towards in the church? So there's this book that I've read. It's a teaching book. It's called Make It Stick. They have this thing that learning stick. And one of the first things is simple. You got to make it simple, easy to understand. And when they talk about simple, they're talking about core. What's the core belief? So I'm in the airline industry. Fred Kelleher was the president of Southwest Airlines. And his core thing that he preached to all his employees was, we are the low-cost carrier in the United States. And every decision had to do that. Are we going to put olives on that tray? We are the low-cost carrier in the United States. No olives, right? And so forth. So what is the core for the Christian church? So, Laura, I can see you ready to say it almost. What was our core slogan in our last church?
Oh, we build sin.
Win, build, send. Win people to Jesus Christ, build them up in Christian faith, and send them out to make other disciples. Win, build, send. Right? That should be the core of every Christian church on the planet. And it's simple, right? You can remember when Bill said, and then you can order your life. Am I doing any of those things, right? So again, we said these guys were relying on one another. If one guy didn't build, there was going to be a hole in the wall. Right? And what we see is that some people went the extra mile. In verses 13 and 14, we see Hanun and the residents of Zenoah. They only built their wall, but they didn't. They built farther. What if the next guy said, I'm not building the dumb gate. Come on, it stinks down here. I'm not going to do that, right? Somebody has to do the job that stinks. If we're going to succeed as a faith, as a church, we need everybody to pull. However, everybody's got different talents, right? As we were in service today, I was watching Patrick, and I was very grateful that Patrick was singing. I missed him for a couple of weeks. It means a lot to me that Patrick comes and sings. And believe me, you would not want me up there singing in this place, right? I was watching people counting money. I was watching Christine make voting. I was watching Andrew reading at the door and so forth. Grady getting food. And everybody using their own talents in their own way. And it becomes a beautiful whole. Excuse me, it makes me almost want to cry. So, in Carl's notes on there, number 9, he tells the story of John Marks, the guy who's the producer on 60 Minutes. So, he grew up in a Christian home, kind of started falling away from the faith. And somebody challenged him, where are you going to spend eternity? And so he went on this personal exploration to figure out, should I really believe this? What's the deal with these evangelical? It says here, what turned to corner him and became a key reason for him to come back to Christ was the church's response to Hurricane Katrina. It wasn't a sermon. It wasn't a bunch of bullshit. One church fed 16,000 people a day for weeks. Another church housed 700 homeless people. Years after the federal assistance was gone, a network of churches was still sending out teams to rebuild houses. That was the turning point for this man. It wasn't what happened inside the four walls of the church. It was the building of the walls that went on outside the church. And we are all called to do that in some way. We used to have a ministry, it was called Men of Service at our old church, and we would fix on people's houses. People usually from the congregation, but we would fix up these people's houses. Usually older people that aren't able to, but not always. We put a couple of roofs on for people and so forth.
And the neighbors know.
And the neighbors know.
You weren't just ministering to the seniors, you were ministering to the neighborhood.
I think of Wiley in the Lane's kitchen floor. It needs to be propped up. It's like, that's a service job. Anyway, enough of that. Remember the big picture. As we go about our business, do it, whatever it is we do, church, what are we doing? We're not just fixing something. We're not just greeting somebody. We're not just teaching somebody, right? We are representing God to these people. Right? And we're establishing God's name in the area. And we're laying the groundwork, potentially, for revival. It worked with this gentleman from 60 Minutes, right? He saw what was going on and it led him back to the Lord. So, Building the walls is a big deal. The world notices. I'll let you read the rest of the notes, but he has an anecdote from the Andy Griffith show. Andy Griffith, the sheriff, is out of town. So Barney and Fife is in charge, and some of the young people know who he is, right? He deputizes Gomer. And they witness a break-in. And Gomer says, "We got to call the police." He says, "We are the police." Right? We are the church. If we're not doing it, who is? Okay. I think that's it for, other than your own personal reflection. Where's God asking you to go? In your personal life, in the life of your church, in the life of your work, in the life of your nation, in the life of the world. Where is God calling you? He's equipped you with some special gifts. I'm not sure what they are for each of you, but rest assured, He hasn't wasted you. He's given you special gifts. And there should be a sense of obligation to how we use them. And pray that God shows you where to use that. So that's the overview. Now we're going to go to chapters 4 and 6. We're going to skip 5. 4 and 6 is the nitty gritty, the grind of the work. Let's see. The first thing we need to remember is we have a chapter 3. And in chapter 3, the walls are built. We have a chapter 3, the Christian law. Chapter 3 is a risen Christ who's coming back to his own someday. We are winning. We're in the middle of chapter 4. It may not feel that way. But we have a chapter 3 that we need to remember. Okay, let's see some of the obstacles that they ran into. Christine, could you read chapter 4, the first couple of 3 verses?
When Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and was greatly incensed. He ridiculed Jews, and in the presence of his associates in the army of Samaria, he said, "What are those feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall and then offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring stones back to life from those heaps of rubble, burned as they are?" Tobiah the Ammonite, who was at his side, said, "What they are building, if even a fox climbed up on it, he would break down their wall and stones."
Okay, good. So here's the first obstacle. How would you characterize this? Bully? Ridicule? Okay.
Possibly.
Trying to discourage them?
Yeah, possibly, fear of what they become.
Yep. Right. All right, Brandon, if you would read verse 4 and 5. Here is his response to that.
Hear us, our God, for we are despised. Turn their insults back on their heads. Give them over as plunder in a land of captivity. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults in the face of the builders.
Okay. Mine says demoralized. So what's his response when he was attacked this way?
Turn to God.
He prayed. Right? He prayed. One thing that's going to come through loud and clear is the number of times that Nehemiah prays in this book. He probably prays at least a dozen different prayers in the course of this book. Right? So that does a couple of things. It's reminding himself that he's got a God who's large and in charge. I'm not sure I would necessarily pray the prayer that he right? But given the circumstances, I guess I can understand. All right.
I think it's really important to think, in terms of when we get old, things happen to you in life, you're not really sure what you want to do or how you can do it. You don't really have plan A or B. Then what do? You pray and trust. And I think that's probably the same situation. Like, okay, God, I need help. You don't have to help out because I can't do it.
I have a friend who said, "You want to make God laugh? Tell him your plans." Okay, Amy, if you could read 6.
At last the wall was completed to have it tight around the entire city, for the people had worked with enthusiasm.
Okay, mine says had a mind to work. Another translation had a heart to work. People that were there were all in. Patrick, if you could read the next verse or two, the reaction after that.
All right. But when Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs and Ammonites, and the people of Ashdod heard that the repairs to Jerusalem's walls had gone ahead and that the gaps were being closed, they were very angry. They all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and stir up trouble against it. But we prayed to our God and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat.
Okay. So they're a threat, right? They're angry, and they're threatening to attack, basically. So first we get ridiculed, and one of the best entities for ridicule, Satan himself. The little voice in the back of your head talking to you that says you can't do this or whatever, right? But somebody we know called the chatterbox, the little chatterbox in the back of your head that's whispering all the failure and defeat and all those kinds of things, right? The chatterbox is real active. That's one of Satan's favorite tools. It's very subtle. And then if you're not careful, it can be very discouraging, right? And we have to remind ourselves when the chatterbox is going, what Jesus said about it, John 8:44. He has always hated the truth because there is no truth in him. And when he lies, if it's consistent with his character, he is a liar and the father of lies. We've got to remind ourselves of that, right? We're in a battle. We are in a spiritual battle, right? And that's one of the tools. Troubles and threats, right? So the first ploy didn't work, right? And so they ramp up the pressure. So I want you to look at chapter 2, verse 10. Who's mentioned that? Chapter 2, verse 10. No, it's the first time we heard these people's names.
Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite.
Okay, now go to 2:19.
And Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite, and Geshem the Arab, they
Okay,
mocked and ridiculed them.
now go to 4:2.
It's prone to the
Associates, wealthy men of Samaria.
Wow.
Right? Now go to verse 7. Right?
They keep getting bigger. There's more and more of them.
Yes. Right. One didn't work, so we get another one and another one. The enemies are multiplying here, right? You ever have a time in your life when that seemed the way that was the way life was going? you just couldn't get a break, and the enemy seemed to be piling up in your life, whether it was bills or health or whatever, work. Satan loves to use those kinds of things to pile on and discourage us even more. Right? We have seasons in life. Unfortunately, I think as we get older, there are more of these seasons too. But Carl says, think of Job, right? He had health issues. He lost his family members. He lost his home. His children died. His wife was telling him to give up on God. That's a classic example of Satan piling on, right? You end up thinking, what else can go wrong? Right? What's Satan going to do to me now? You're a pastor. When's the phone going to ring now? Right? And what's that going to do to my world? I would live in fear if the phones ring, I think, if I were a pastor. Paul dealt with it when he was trying to plant churches, right? That's one of Satan's tactics to try to overwhelm you with trouble. Again, you got to remember chapter 3. We don't fight for victory. We fight from victory as Christians. Hard to remember in the middle of chapter 4. All right, verses 11 and 12. Ray, is that you?
4,
Oh, I'm sorry. Before we do that, verse 9. What's his reaction to all this piling on?
Right?
Pray.
He prayed, right? And what else did he do? Right? They set up a guard. So we're not supposed to be stupid as Christians, right? You're not supposed to do nothing. And, I pray to God and he'll save me. What's like the story of the guy with the flood? And he prays that God would save him. Hope comes and he's like, no, God's going to save me. And then they send a helicopter and he doesn't get on. And God's going to save me and he ends up drowning. And it's like, well, what did you want? So we're expected to do what we can reasonably do. But we, at some point, have to count on the Lord too. All right, Ray, if you would pick up at 11.
And our enemies said, they will not know or see until we come among them, kill them, put a stop to the work. And it came, you know, verse 12 too?
Yeah.
Okay. And it came about when the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times, they will come up against us from every place where you may turn.
Okay, and then it says, you set up a guard, basically. So not only is he hearing it from the enemies, he's hearing it from the Jews and the surrounding towns and stuff. Like 10 times he hears it, they're going to come and attack you. It's kind of good news, bad news, right? It's bad news, but at least there was good news that he knew about it ahead of time and could do something about it. Right? And so he ends up stationing people. Andrew, if you could read 13 to 14.
Therefore, I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall in the exposed places, posting them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. After I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your families, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes.
Okay, so what two things did he do in those verses?
Fortified.
He fortified them. That's the first thing. What's the second?
Then he encouraged them to fight for your family.
That's right. So he encouraged them. He didn't browbeat them. He didn't threaten them. Right? He appealed to the things that were most precious to them. Fight for your families. Right? We don't get people to do things we want them to do by browbeating them. I mean, I guess it's possible, right? I mean, people have been slaves and stuff, but that's not leadership. Right? Leadership is showing people why they should do something, and then letting them decide So, all right, Grady, 15.
When our enemies heard that we were aware of their plot and that God had frustrated it, we all returned to the wall, each to our own work.
Okay, so they didn't attack because they knew they were waiting for us.
Mhm.
All right. Next verse, I guess. Next couple of verses.
But from then on, only half my men worked, while the other half stood guard with spears, shields, bows, and coats of mail. The leaders stationed themselves behind the people of Judah who were building the wall. The laborers carried on their work with one hand supporting their load and one hand holding a weapon.
Okay.
Mhm.
You could do one more.
Okay, all the builders had a sword belt to their side. The trumpeter stayed with me to sound the alarm.
Okay, so they took prudent steps, right? God expects us to be prudent. Really slowed the work down, I would think. With you carrying a sword in one hand and a rock in the other, right? But they didn't stop. They kept plugging. You know, you think about this job. Let's build 1.5 miles of wall, 8 feet thick, maybe 30 feet high, and we only got a few of us, and it just seems impossible, you know? And yet they did it. And we look around us, I think the Ray's sermon today, things that look impossible, and it's like God uses the small people to accomplish the impossible. And He's still God. The problem I see is we're not in the mind to do the work. I look at the church across America and I think, where is the unity? And I'm not a native of South Carolina, and I drive down the road. There's a Baptist church, there's a Baptist church, there's a Baptist church, there's a Presbyterian church, there's a Methodist church, there's 5 more Baptist churches. Does nobody get along? Why aren't all these churches on our knees pleading before God to turn all the things that Ray talked about? Why aren't we begging God to intervene? All I can think of is what would happen if every church in America begged their people, pleaded with their people to get on your knees and pray to God to turn this country around. Do you think God would hear? And yet we're busy trying to fight about, well, we're not using the King James version. That's no good. Just picky in little stuff like that, right? I'll get off the soapbox. All right. So we talked about how he used fear, right? He's going to come and kill you. So he uses fear, right? He tries to distract us with it, try to paralyze us with it. And he does this all the time. Let me ask you, have you ever tried to speak to someone about Christ with salvation? And if you have, was there any fear involved in that, thinking about doing that? If you say no, I think you're wrong.
It seems to me when you do that, it's such a sensitive thing, and it's such a life-changing thing, or it's so important, and you really don't want to screw up. And I struggle with that.
I'll teach you the final prayer. Okay? I'll pray with you. Dear God, help me not to screw this up. It's prayer, okay? I'm learning from an astronaut, so.
I pray, put your arm around my shoulder and your hand over my mouth.
How'd you like to walk into a room full of people who are practicing homosexual lifestyle and say, this is what God's word says, male and female who created you people are all off base? Think that would be a little intimidating? And so we don't. And so we live in a world we live in. You know, it's pretty convicting to start thinking about it. But we don't know when the word's going to change somebody's life. For this fellow from 60 Minutes, somebody challenged him whether he was going to spend eternity. It took 2 years of searching to finally figure it out. And we just never know. You know? And so we need to be ready. How do we get ready? We do it in Nehemiah. We pray up. If we're not prayed up, we're miss the opportunity. All right. Discouragement. That also comes in verse 10 and stuff, right? Carl makes the point, 10 of the 15 times that you find the word discouraged in the Bible, you also find do not be afraid, terrified. Discouragement and fear go hand in hand. And we begin to doubt. Is this really God's plan for my life? Is this really what God said? And we need to look at, we need to fix our focus, right? We talked about that earlier. It's so easy to look at the what ifs. What if this happens? What if they get offended? What if, fill in your what if, right? What we need to focus on is not what if. What we need to focus on is what David said. But God. Yeah, I can't do this. But God. God can. Right? I mean, we're human. We're going to get discouraged. It's going to happen. Things are going to get tough. We're going to feel like God's abandoned us sometimes, probably. And we need to focus on that. Finally, in chapter 6, nothing's worked up to now, so they take another tack to try and stop the work. So, hopefully, I guess we're to you. If you could read the first 4 or 5 verses here. 5 verses, I think.
Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem the Arab, and the rest of our enemies found out that I had finished building the wall and that no gaps remained, though we had not yet set up the doors and gates. So Sanballat and Geshem sent a message asking me to meet them at one of the villages in the plains of Oman. But I realized they were planning to harm me, so I replied by sending this message to them. I am engaged in a great work, so I can't come. Why should I stop working to come and meet with you? 4 times they sent the same message, and each time I gave them the same reply. The 5th time, Sanballat's servant came with an open letter in his hand.
Okay, yeah, I guess we should read part of it.
And this is what it said. There is a rumor among the surrounding nations, and Geshem tells me it's true, that you and the Jews are planning to rebel, and that is why you are rebuilding the wall. According to his reports, he plans to be their king. He also reports that you have appointed prophets to Jerusalem to proclaim about you. Look, there is a king of Judah. You can be very sure that this report will get back to the king, so I suggest you come to the prophet of the king.
Okay, so there's a couple of things there. So what's he doing here? All these things to discourage the workers didn't work. So who do they turn to now? They attack the leadership, right? So first they try and distract them, right? Come out and meet with us. And he knew that they were probably plotting to kill him if he came out. And he was able to discern them. Again, I think that's partly because he was prayed up. That was revealed to him, I believe, by God. And they were persistent, weren't they? 4 times. And he answered them the same way, right? And then in verse 5, what did they do?
So sealed letter, Ordinance 5.
They sent an unsealed letter saying, basically lies, right? You're planning to rebel. Think about that for a minute, right? It was an unsealed letter. What's the significance of that?
What's everybody to
Yeah,
do?
Yeah, everybody, oh, why are you sending them him, right? And so he's spreading lies and rumors about the leadership, and he's making it easy for it to spread, right? And of course, in the next few verses, Nehemiah denies all of it. You're making all this stuff, and so forth, right? In verse 13, let's do number 10. Sean, can you, 10 through, I guess 13, 12, 10 through 12. Oh, 13, I'm sorry, 13.
12 or 13?
13.
Later, I went to visit Shipman,
Yeah, close enough. I don't know what it
son
is.
of, here we go with these names. The
Don't worry about
grandson of
First letter.
who was confined to his home. He said, "Let us meet together inside the temple of God and bolt the doors shut. Your enemies are coming to kill you tonight." But I replied, "Should someone in my position run from danger? Should someone in my position enter the temple and save his life? No, I won't do it." I realized that God had not spoken to him, but that he had uttered this prophecy against me because Tobias and Bella had hired me. They were hoping to intimidate me and make me sin. Then they would be able to accuse and discredit me.
Okay, good. So going into the temple for refuge was something that you could do in the culture. You would be protected as long as you were in the temple. They weren't going to murder somebody inside the temple building. Again, I see Nehemiah's leadership here, right? He's not going to go cower in the corner. At the risk of his life, he's not going to go cower. Talk about building some credibility. Right? Should a man in my position flee, I won't do it. And he equates it to sin. Right? So they tried to intimidate him, they spread lies about him, and then they tried to trick him into sinning. Next week, we're going to be voting leadership in the meeting. Right? We have one of our leaders sitting right here at the end of the table. Don't think for a minute that man is being attacked by Satan. And we need to be his prayer support. You should always be supporting the pastor in prayer, and not just your pastor, but all the church leadership. Right? If you can get a leader, the world knows it, right? We've seen some spectacular examples over the years, media and stuff, with some of these quote evangelical preachers and stuff. And it gives Christianity a bad name when it happens. God still, Satan still tries to stop the work of God and stuff. Discourage us, make us fearful, listen to the chatterbox in our head, right? So, this was the bad news week. Okay? There is good news in these chapters too, which we're going to cover next time. And we skipped chapter 5. And chapter 5 is just as devastating as what we've read. Chapter 5 is about the rot within, basically. And then we're going to talk about how Nehemiah combated all of this stuff, as we see that he did. And there's lessons there for you and I. Remember, we have a chapter 3. So, I think that's all I have. I feel like I talked too much today. You guys didn't talk enough. But here's the notes for. I should have had that out before now. So for your homework, you could reread this. You got to hear this stuff more than once sometimes for it to stick. Don't worry about the names. Worry about the principles, okay? And think about what walls we need to be building. You need to be building. Are there breaches in the walls of your spiritual walk personally? Are there breaches in our church, local, that God's calling us to do something about? Are there breaches in the national or universal church? God's calling us to do something about. And I do believe that the biggest part of the fight is done on your knees. Let's have a quick prayer unless someone wants to chime in with something. You don't want to shut you off. Did you sense a theme today during the sermon and this? I felt like I did. I was listening to Ray's sermon with this whole thing in mind. It's like, okay, God, I guess you're trying to talk to us. And, all right, let's pray. Lord, I'm going to thank you for just everyone that's in this room, for their attentiveness. And thank you that you care enough to speak to us. Lord, it's hard to think about where we might have come up short. And I know each of us can probably think that we did. Thank you that you're a God who is forgiving. And you've already forgiven us. You did it on the cross and on the cross. And you don't stop there. You send the Holy Spirit to educate us, to reveal Scripture to us, and to empower us for the work that you have us do. I pray, Lord, that you would help us to be in touch with you this week. We be open to whatever you want to say to us. Lord, help us not to succumb to discouragement, fear, lies, and other things we talk about. Help us to remember when we fight from victory. And we just thank you for the victory of Jesus Christ. I pray you bless each one this week.